Hi, everyone. This is Cynthia, and this is the North San Joaquin Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society, and we've been running a webinar series for quite a few months. This is our 5th event, and our speaker today is Professor Andy Gardner, who's an associate professor of biology at Stanislaus State. He's also a member of our chapter. We're so honored, Andy. And his topic is a basic botany of our favorite California wildflowers, structures, pollination, and seed dispersal. And I actually asked Andy to give this talk because I'm really a kind of dabbler in native plants. I love them, but I don't really know much about plants. And I thought it would be really good to have some basic understanding, especially of the wildflowers. Okay, so I'm just going to have, yeah, Mike?
Well, I wasn't sure if you were waiting for me to take over or what.
No, I was just trying to get to my next slide. Mike, could you make sure that it says that it's being recorded?
I saw it say it was being recorded, and I do see the red dot up on the left. So yes, it's being recorded.
Yeah, when I go into screen share, I don't see it. So I just have a few slides here kind of explaining our webinar series. Then Mike, who was just talking, he's in our chapter, of course, and he's going to talk about our chapter. I'll give an intro of our speaker, then we'll have our speaker. We are recording this event, and we'll upload it to our YouTube channel at nsjv_cnps. Our website hasn't been launched yet, so watch Facebook for the new announcements of our next webinars, but we're pretty much having them once a month. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, we've had 4 webinars already, and these have been the topics: biodiversity, reliable California native plants for a garden with no irrigation, planting and growing a California native plant garden, and inspirational outings, public lands of California's Central Valley. All these webinars were recorded and are in our YouTube channel. Upcoming webinars, well, there's, of course, today with Professor Gardner, and then March 13th, arranging California native plants and bouquets, garlands, and wreaths. April 10th is vernal pools of the Central Valley, and May 8th is the La Loma California Native Plant Garden. You can actually register for these events now, and the registration links are in our newsletter. If you don't have our newsletter, which is quite the spectacular edition, thanks to Mike, just put your email address in the chat, and Mike will send it to you. And we also post our events on cnps.org/events, although not all of these are up there yet. So this is our YouTube channel, nsjv_cnps. We, at our webinars, we've had about 400 people total attending, 500 views on our channel, and we already have 48 subscribers. So we're not just kind of saying, oh, how great that is, but also that, you know, we really are reaching a good audience with these presentations. Sorry, I've got a few dogs here, and they're barking at my other dog. The webinars are recorded. I told you that already. I'm kind of repeating some of these things, but typically it's the second Monday evening of each month. In fact, it's probably always going to be like that. The next one is Monday, March 13th, which is the floral displays. Now, if you have an idea for a webinar and you want to be a speaker, just send me an email. Here's my email address. Then I'll come back to this, which is a quick intro of Professor Gardner. And now I'm going to give the screen to Mike. Mike, you want to take it?
Okay, yeah, I'm here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let's see, here we go. All right, you see mine now?
Yes.
All right, good deal. So I wanted to give you an introduction to our chapter, the North San Joaquin Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. The California Native Plant Society is a statewide organization, and you can join it for a regular individual membership of $50 to receive Flora and Artemisia magazines, get benefits such as discounts at certain nurseries, sales, and such, and the ability to join 2 different chapters of CNPS. So we're one chapter, you can join a different one. With the latest email that I sent out, I included a discount that CNPS is offering to make your membership $30 for new members. So this is kind of one of those, if you are just wondering about it, you want to try it at kind of a discount, this is the perfect opportunity for you. I only sent out this offer to people that I don't have down as members. So in other words, if you're I've got a lot of people that expressed interest at festivals and things like that, and I'm sending you the email, but just someone, yeah, I'm sending everybody this newsletter, but you're not necessarily going to be the statewide member. So if you want to join that at a discount and help the statewide organization, this is for you. Let me know. I'll go ahead and include that stuff for anybody who requests it. I only sent it to those that I know you're permanently members. So we hope you enjoy the join us here in the North San Joaquin chapter, and whichever other chapter you feel a kinship with. As I said, the $50 membership was $50. I mentioned discounted rate, but there are other lower dues for people who have reduced membership and higher membership levels for those who are able to help the organization more financially. It's a great cause. So just go to cnps.org/membership. Our 3rd edition of the new newsletter has just been sent out. Volume 3 of the Oak Branch was sent out for all members via email. This was our Wildflower edition. We have articles on native wildflowers you can find at Table Mountain and Red Hills, and a whole bunch of other stuff. We have our butterfly blog page and monthly field trips. So we got like 4 or 5 that we are advertising right now. There are monthly field trips to various places to look at wildflowers and things like that, along with information on the webinar series. So I should point out that we intend to do everything by email at this point. We recognize that there are some people who actually prefer US mail. And for those who are inconvenienced, we do apologize, but we don't yet have the financial or volunteer base to put the newsletter out that way. We've decided to save some trees and remain electronic. Now, if this is a true problem, let us know. So, so far, no one has come to us and said that it's been a problem. But if it is, let us know, and that way we'll at least know that it's a problem. You should have received it, but if you are on our lists, but somehow got missed, let me know in chat. For example, if you're not on our list and you want to be on our list to receive all this information, there are going to be some people that I have, frankly, a bad email for them. And if you signed up at a festival or something like that, haven't received anything from me, it could be that your email got corrupted somehow. So let me know also that in the chat. If you didn't get the newsletter, let me know. I'm going to go. I'll be looking in chat while Andy's talking. We also have a lot of people who have expressed an interest in native plants, but who haven't joined us yet. And we hope to keep you in the loop as well. We're going to send you all that information. Why care about native plants? I was asked this question recently. What's the deal? Isn't this just a hobby? No, we are finding out more and more each day about the true need to restore our environment as much as we can. The man who has been trying to explain the need for native plants with the most eloquence is Doug Ptolemy, a professor from Delaware. He's written 3 books on the subject, all of which circle around the theme that we have been damaging the environment dramatically, but there is hope in native plants. 95% of all birds feed insects to their young. Caterpillars are an important component of that diet, And caterpillars cannot live on non-native plants for the most part, with very few exceptions. Native plants are critical to the ecosystem, and a backyard with no native plants, and that is a devastatingly high percentage of them, are ecological dead zones. Planting native plants in our yards helps moths, butterflies, native bees, and other pollinators, and therefore birds, and the web goes on and on. Our cities need not be devoid of butterflies. And for more information about this, you can watch a 1-hour video that knocked me over like a brick. This was a talk sponsored by local Audubon chapters just this past January of Doug Ptolemy. And that YouTube right there is the YouTube for the talk that he gave. If you just take a screenshot and watch this at your leisure, or you can put in Restoring Nature's Relationships. He's got a lot of talks that are on YouTube right now. It's basically circling around the same thing, and he's a very eloquent speaker. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Cynthia, and I'll be in chat for those with questions, comments. If you want a newsletter, if you want to be on our list to get information about our, I'll be sending out a monthly update. The newsletter comes out quarterly, but I'll send out every month. I'll let you know what's happening with the Native Plant Society, this chapter. All right, thank you, Cynthia.
Hey, Mike, they've asked if you can put the link of the video in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, well, I'm thrilled to introduce Professor Andy Gardner. And for those of you that have just joined us after the very beginning, Andy's Associate Professor of Biology at Stanislaus State, and he's a member of our chapter. So that's really great for us to have this kind of expertise in our chapter. He also runs the Stanislaus State Plant Diversity Lab and Herbarium, and he's the responsible academic for the Trans-California Pathway at Stanislaus State. And Andy, I don't know if you were going to mention that, but I think that is something that quite a few people would be interested in knowing about, that Trans-California Pathway. So I just grabbed a few little tidbits from Andy's background, but he can tell you more. But I found it interesting. He studied the evolution of oxalis while obtaining his PhD, because we all love the native oxalis, but not the others. And he emphasizes mentorship and outreach along with his teaching. Andy, now you want to take the screen and you can start.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone else, for being here. All right. Let's share my screen. All right. I hope you can hear me. So yes, as they mentioned, I'm a professor of botany at Stanislaus State in Turlock. I moved here in 2016 with my family when I got the job, and I say this, I try to say this as often as I can. I'm so lucky to be here as a biologist, as someone who's excited about diversity, and someone who wants to contribute. There's so much to learn and to tell about the Central Valley. And I'm just excited to be a part of it. So I've been teaching courses on plant taxonomy and plant morphology, as well as general biology, and working with a great team at Stan State. We have a number of great resources, and one of them, Cynthia mentioned the Trans-California Pathway. In our campus is in Turlock, and on the southeast corner of campus, there's a small artificial stream and a walkway along it called the Trans-California Pathway. And it represents a transect from roughly Patterson to Yosemite. And it's planted with plants that are of those areas. And there's been varying degrees of success along the transect. And as one might imagine, the areas representing the more higher elevation parts of the state have been less successful so far. So we're learning and doing it with students. And you're welcome to come and explore at any time. It's open to the public. Okay, so I'll mention that again at the end. Today, what I'm going to talk about is just botany generally of California wildflowers. So I'll talk about floral structures, pollination, and seed dispersal mechanisms. So it's kind of a flower and fruit anatomy 101 in several slides, and then a bunch of different examples. I think it was mentioned earlier that if you're interested in, if you have a question and you want to post it in the chat, you should feel free to. It's a little bit tricky for me to monitor the chat while I'm talking and displaying the full screen, but I think the team is going to help me out with that a little bit too. So don't hesitate. Okay. All right. So Cynthia asked me to give a real botany talk, and so I thought I'd start us off, with the basics of floral morphology. And if you kind of have the core of these ideas in mind, then you can think about all kinds of ways to modify them. And so here's where we'll get started, I guess. So flowers are modified shoots. A shoot is a plant structure that has a stem and leaves coming off of it. And these shoots are really shortened down. So the stem part is quite short, and that's called the receptacle here on the slide. From that stem are several modified leaves, and these leaves serve different roles in most flowers. And starting from the bottom and going up to the top or the outside in, you see a set of leaves that we call the calyx. Each of these is a sepal. Usually these are protecting the outside of the flower when it's in bud. Just inside of these is the ring, the set of petals, or the corolla. Oftentimes these are the showy part of a flower. These two rings of modified leaves, sometimes called whorls, are often referred to as the perianth. So these are the whorls of the flower that are not containing sexual structures. So after this, we get to the more interesting sexual ones. So the next whorl up is the andrecium. So this is the set of male structures, stamens with anthers. The anthers are where process happens to generate pollen grains. On the center of a flower, usually you should be able to find a gynecium, or maybe several gynecia. So these are the carpels with ovaries inside. And this is where the female structures are, which generate little baby embryo sacs. Okay, so flowers have these four whorls, a female whorl, a male whorl, petals and sepals all together. And you can modify those in all kinds of different ways. So sometimes these whorls are quite distinct, and you can easily dissect them off each other. Sometimes, however, they kind of spiral and intergrade among each other. Also, some flowers have a fixed number of parts, and other flowers actually can have a variable number, especially ones that have that big spiral or arrangement. Flowers can take on different symmetries. So many flowers are radially symmetrical, but then flowers, lots of different lineages of plants have independently evolved bilateral symmetry or even asymmetry. And finally, different parts of these flowers can be fused. So you can have fusion of the same whorl. Very commonly, for instance, all the petals will be fused to form a tube or like a bell-shaped structure. You can also fuse adjacent whorls. So sometimes, for instance, the stamens are fused to the petals. So if you take that basic structure and modify it in lots of different ways, you can kind of build whatever flower you want. Few more flower terms. Flowers are described by botanists as complete or incomplete. A complete flower has all four of those whorls that I mentioned in the previous slide. And because it has both an androecium and a gynoecium, it's also called perfect. That is, it's bisexual. Incomplete flowers are missing one or more of their whorls. If they're missing one of the sexual whorls, either the gynoecium or the androecium, they're called imperfect. When flowers are imperfect or unisexual, they can be on either monoecious plants or dioecious plants. Monoecious plants have male and female flowers born on a single individual. So an example of this shown here is alnus, the elder. So you're seeing male flowers on the left and female, male inflorescences, clusters of flowers, and female inflorescences on the right. Dioecious individuals or dioecious plants bear either male or female flowers. That is, there are male individuals. And a great example of that are willows. Are we good? Sorry. Yep. Okay, so, whoops. So basically, these are different sexual systems, and different plant species exhibit all of these. And a lot of the plants, a lot of the flowers that I'll talk about today, frankly, are complete and perfect. Many of the flowers that we like to grow and look at in our gardens are showy, and so they have many of the whorls. After flowers are pollinated, that is, when the pollen is carried somehow to the stigma of the carpel, and that pollen grows down in there and fertilizes the embryo sac, that generates an embryo. Those embryos are carried in seeds, and the seeds are carried in the carpel, the female part of the flower. So that female part of the flower oftentimes enlarges and becomes what we call a fruit. So fruits are floral structures that carry seeds, that carry the next generation. And fruits, just like flowers, take on a whole wide array of different arrangements. And if you know a little bit about the flower that gave rise to the fruit, then oftentimes you can characterize the fruit more effectively. So some fruits actually come not from a single flower, but an entire inflorescence. And the kind of classic example of this is a pineapple. You know, people sell a pineapple as a fruit, but actually each one of those little kind of diamond-shaped structures is a berry. And they're all just packed in right tight together. So each of those berries was produced by a single flower. So that was an entire set of flowers on that structure. If you're looking at a fruit derived from a single flower, then you have to ask, did this fruit come from a flower that had a single carpel, a single gynoecium, whether that was a simple one or one that had a bunch of structures fused together? Or is this a bunch of little fruits born from separate carpels? So the example I'm showing here of an example of a fruit born from many separate carpels, or apocarpus, is this strawberry. Strawberries are called fruits and sold as fruits, but actually it's a collection of fruits. This flower had hundreds of separate carpels on it. And each one of those carpels is that little tiny dot on the outside of your strawberry. All the red stuff is the receptacle, the original stem that bore all the whorls of the flower. So that receptacle is what swells up and tastes good. And it's carrying tons of little teeny tiny fruits that are hoping to find their way all the way through our guts and to wherever we leave them. So because they're all separate, that's a different kind of a fruit. A lot of the fruits, though, that we eat and we think about are coming from a single carpel or a syncarpous gynoecium. If that's the case, you can kind of split those into dry fruits or fleshy fruits. Fleshy fruits, you know well. That's the fruits you often go to the grocery store for. So things like berries, which are here represented by grapes, or pomes represented by this apple, or an orange, which is a different kind of a berry called a hesperidium. All these things are derived from a flower that had a single fused female structure in the center. And when it was pollinated, it got much larger and it made all that fleshy tissue that we like to eat. So most of these are berries, but there are other different kinds of variations in the fleshy fruit world. A lot of the fruits that people forget about are dry fruits. Dry fruits are where that structure, that floral structure that was carrying the seeds, it dries out at maturity. And sometimes it stays closed and it holds that seed. It really locks it in for a long time. An example of that is a sunflower seed. Sunflower seeds are actually fruits. That's why you often chew this part off, or sometimes you can buy the small little parts inside, which are the actual seeds. An example of a dry fruit that opens up or dehisces is the fruit of redbud. So redbud is a common local shrub. You find it all around California in the West. Lots of people grow eastern redbud in their gardens. And if you know anything about redbud, which I'll talk about, it's in the pea family. And pea pods, if they're allowed to dry out long enough, eventually split open and the seeds can come out. And that's what I'm showing here. So botanists basically characterize fruits based on the anatomy of the flowers that gave rise to them and the processes of development that happen after pollination. Okay, So now what I'm going to do is just go through a bunch of different native plants. I'll spend a few minutes talking about each one. And I'll finish talking a little bit about some plants we study, and we can go from there. Again, don't hesitate to ask any questions. Okay, whoops. All right, so thanks, Sally. Oaks, I'll start with. One of the most common questions I get asked by students in botany is either about trees or it's about grasses. And they'll say, wait, those are flowering plants? I didn't realize that. It turns out they are. And a lot of flowering plants that people kind of don't notice are making flowers, but they're just not making flowers for our attention. These are plants that are wind pollinated. A lot of wind pollinated plants have very simple flowers and lots of them, right? So as an example, in this oak tree, the male flowers are produced in these clusters called catkins. And each cluster has lots and lots of little flowers on it. The flowers themselves barely have any kind of perianth, so no real sepals or petals. They're just all anther, like just all pollen producers. And they make pollen and they open up and they just free it to the wind. Nearby, a little bit further down the branches, are female flowers. There are many fewer of those, and what they do is they catch that pollen. And if they do, they can generate those beautiful acorns. So, acorns grow from this floral structure, and that floral structure remains on the tree. It's called a cupule. And the acorn itself is a rock solid, indehiscent fruit. It's actually a true nut. Many things around here are called nuts, like almonds. But actually, if you know almonds, they have a fleshy fruit wall around the outside of them. So they're not true nuts. I'm sure many of you have seen jays and other animals dispersing oak nuts, hiding them, maybe losing them. I love seeing old trees that are filled with acorns that are put there by woodpeckers. And around here, we've got several oak species. I think my favorite, simply just because of its proximity, is valley oak, Quercus lobata. This is endemic to the Central Valley, and it's a beautiful oak tree. They're just starting to, real soon, they'll be looking like these pictures here on the right. We'll just start to see some leaves and inflorescences flushing. So because oaks carry male flowers and female flowers on the same individual, that's called monoecious. That's in contrast with something like a willow, where you have male flowers entirely on one plant and female flowers on a completely separate plant. That's called dioecious. So, you know, willows are either male or female, whereas oaks are hermaphrodites. The other plant that people often forget or maybe don't realize is a flowering plant are grasses. We've got a lot of great grasses around here. Many of them are non-native, but nonetheless, grasses are really cool if you look carefully. A lot of people don't really pay much attention with grasses just because they take some attention, and you know, it seems like there's just a lot of them. But when you look closely, you'll see that grass flowers have both male and female parts. They have stamens and they have carpels. and they're carried in this stem structure with little modified leaves, which are called lemma and palea, for instance. Lots of good terminology. These wind-pollinated plants very commonly, as I mentioned, have really reduced flowers because they're not trying to create a showy structure that's going to attract a pollinator. Instead, they have flowers, for instance, the male structures are going to be huge and generate lots and lots of pollen. So on this picture on the left of deer grass, you're seeing all these anthers all around on the outside. And, you know, wind pollination means that they just have wide ranging spread of their pollen, and they get around. Okay, moving on from the wind pollinated things to another group that I think are often sort of kind of ignored or kind of not noticed by a lot of people out in nature in California are the buckwheats. Buckwheats you can always find, and especially in the toughest, driest, roughest soils, you can find buckwheats. And buckwheats have these tiny little flowers, but they make up for it by making lots and lots of them. And one thing that's neat about buckwheat inflorescences is generally they have some color change as the flowers mature. So you're seeing some orangey tones at the center of this eriogonum inflorescence, whereas the fully open flowers, you're just seeing yellow. Color change among the flowers of inflorescences is actually quite common. This is a way it's thought, and I'm not exactly sure how much evidence exists to basically guide pollinators towards the flowers that are receptive, that are ready to either deliver pollen or receive it. Buckwheats are really valuable as pollinator plants because they serve a wide array of insect pollinators, all kinds of things from flies to bees to hoverflies. Because buckwheats live on these really extreme environments, they're often in windswept places, and they tend to hold their seeds for a while and disperse them just kind of abiotically, just kind of letting it go out into the world. Next up are the manzanitas, Arctostaphylos. Manzanitas are flowering right now. I have one in my garden that's got some beautiful pink flowers that are just starting to really color up and inflate. Manzanitas have these cool, totally tubular structures. And so this is a fused corolla. All the petals are fused to make that bell shape. And in the center picture, you can see where the bee is putting its head. You can see the tips of the petals just breaking off from that floral tube. Inside of there is the andrecium and gynoecium. And one thing that's neat about manzanitas is the anthers, which hold the pollen grains. Basically, they don't release the pollen grains unless they're shaken at super high frequency. I was reading that apparently they experience something like 30 Gs when a bee gets on there and starts to buzz. And when the bee buzzes, the pollen grains come down and land right on its face, right where it'd like them. So these flowers are visited by bees, and bees buzz and release the pollen and take it away. Of course, they deliver some to some other flowers. And when the flowers are pollinated, they develop these berry little berries. And they were called manzanitas by the Spanish because they look like little apples. But an apple is a poem. Okay, so the next one on our list is a member of the family I always tell my students is the fabulous Fabaceae. The Fabaceae are the pea family. And there are many members of Fabaceae. Michael had a beautiful picture of lupines at the end of his introduction talk, another member of the family. Fabaceae are known for their really cool flowers. You can see these tiny little magenta flowers on this redbud here. And this is the classic pea flower shape, where some petals are fused and other petals are held upright. And they're all funny names like wings and keels. But basically, this flower type is very attractive to bees.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Good night. Good night. Good night. Okay.
Sorry, is there a question? Nope.
I think somebody accidentally
I think,
unmuted.
Yeah, it's cool. This is Zoom. Yeah, no, so the Fabaceae, in addition to having these flowers that are pollinated by bees, here you can see a bee popping its way into this flower and loading up with more pollen. In addition to that, those flowers mature into pea pods. So the Fabaceae make these structures, these fruit structures that look just like pea pods. And as they dry out and mature, they basically eventually break off the branches, whether it's on a windy winter day or on some animal trying to get at it. But basically, they just hang on there and they slowly release those seeds over time. And as I mentioned earlier, as the pods dry more and more, they start splitting open and the seeds fall away. One thing that I love about redbuds is the way that they flower on their old wood before the leaves have emerged. This is really common among a lot of trees that are flowering and trying to attract pollinators, especially because it basically just, it keeps the flowers open and available to the pollinators and accessible before the leaves come in and shade them all out and block the view. I see Matthew Ampersand has a hand up.
Yeah, Andrew, are they also going to be working with rhizobium to fix nitrogen then?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the members of Fabaceae are nitrogen fixers. And so what we're talking about is the fact that on their roots, they form these basically round little blob structures called nodules. And those nodules are basically houses for bacteria. So this bacterium called rhizobium comes in and actually moves into the cells of these nodule structures, which provide the ideal environment for it to fix nitrogen, which is one of the limiting factors to all growth on life. And so because of that, members of the Fabaceae have been used by agriculturalists all over the world since the beginning of agriculture as a way to enrich their soils. Thanks for that. Okay. One really important group to always learn more about are the Asteraceae, or the composite family. there are too many genera to name and too many species among them to learn. But starting to get a handle on how their inflorescences are built, and some of the common ones around you, you can start to really unlock an understanding of this family. So here I'm just showing several of them around here. One of the key characteristics of the Asteraceae family are the fact that their flowers are actually entire inflorescences. So rather than each individual flower creating its own individual display, all the flowers are collaborating together to create one larger, stronger, more impressive display. In some members of Asteraceae, like this blowwise shown down at the bottom right, Racana, all of the flowers are the same. Another example of this would be like a dandelion. That's one way, one kind of arrangement of inflorescence that you can find among the Asteraceae. The others that I'm showing here are the classic daisy style flowers. In this case, you've got flowers in the center that are very small, but actually perfect bisexual flowers, and complete flowers as well. They have sepals and petals. And ringing the outside are the big showy ray flowers. And quite commonly, the ray flowers are asexual. They're just dedicated entirely to creating that display. As you look carefully, you see that generally the disc flowers open in kind of a spiral arrangement, often from the outside towards the center. So in this erigeron or fleabane here from Knight's Ferry, you can see the outer disc flowers are kind of opening up and extending, whereas the inner ones and even at the center are still green. I think maybe a friend's here, a long lost friend, and I'm really grateful. Yeah, so Asteraceae have these inflorescences. Of course, the sunflower is helianthus. Not enough space to show that, it's too big, right? Okay. My next slide here is Sambucus, the elderberry. Sambucus are common all over the Northern Hemisphere. And elderberries have this incredible capacity to grow really fast. You could just whack them way back and they just spring forth every spring. And every year, we're welcomed by elderberry flowers on the Trans-California pathway. So here you're seeing an individual with big inflorescences of flowers and then transitioning to fruit. And eventually these fruits turn almost, solid black, and the stems can be quite reddish. And these are appreciated by many, right? So growing up as a kid, I used to like Monty Python, and there's a scene where a Frenchman's telling him his father smelled of elderberry. And that's apparently an old European, basically a way of saying his father was a peasant because he drank elderberry wine rather than grape wine. Hey, there's a question in the chat. Is the Trans-California pathway in bloom now? Some things are flowering. So very soon, some of the oaks will be flowering. The manzanitas are in full bloom. And then many things are really primed to get going really soon. So for instance, a lupine is full of inflorescences. I'm already seeing the Sambucus really springing, but they won't really get into flower for a while. And then lots of annual flowers are going. Things like Clarkias are springing from the soil all over the place. So we're looking forward to those.
Hey, as long as you're answering questions, there was one earlier. Are Aragonium flowers perfect?
Oh, yeah. So buckwheats, I believe they are perfect. Yeah, I'd have to double check, which I'm not going to do at the moment, but that's my recollection. Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Right. So elderberries serve all this insect community in the pollination phase of its life. And then it serves mammals and birds a lot in dispersal. And on the pathway, a member of our department actually collects elderberry and makes elderberry jam for us some years, which is great. One of the most incredible plants you can find in California or anywhere else for that matter are the milkweeds. Milkweeds have these unbelievably complex flowers that are orchid-like in many ways. If you look carefully at their flowers and you manipulate them enough, you might be able to find a pollinium. That's this picture at the center. A pollinium is a structure that has all the pollen grains all collected together. And the other group of plants that's known for making pollinia are orchids. Orchid flowers do the same thing. These pollinia are removed from the flowers by the pollinators, usually bees, and then they're carried on to the next flowers, where sometimes they're correctly placed to complete pollination. Milkweeds are really culturally relevant and significant and salient these days because of all the interest in helping to support and increase monarch butterfly populations. Monarchs use milkweeds at multiple stages of their life cycle, and the reduction of milkweeds from like disturbed adjacent areas of farm fields and stuff has really reduced butterfly populations. Do some insects get stuck in the flowers? That's a great question, Sandra, and one I don't have an answer to, unfortunately. Another thing about milkweeds that's cool, if you ever have a chance to see them later in the year, well after pollination, their fruits are these large pod-like structures which are called follicles. And a follicle is simply a fruit that kind of opens up on one side, sort of splits open. And when the follicle fruits open, the seeds themselves have these really long seed hairs attached to them, which facilitate wind dispersal. And the clumsy ones. And so, if you ever see milkweed in fruit, the minute you see it, you'll instantly recognize it because it's unlike anything else around here. At Stan State, we've had a project going the last several months to germinate hundreds of Asclepias fascicularis seedlings to plant on the Trans-California Pathway and in other places around campus. And we're really excited this spring to start moving them out. We have something like 250 pots, and Lynn, who's in here, is the student that's spearheading that project. So we're really excited. All with seeds supplied by Rhonda, who's also in here. So thanks everyone, and we're really looking forward to getting them installed. If you want to participate in installing them, this year during Science Day, which is on March 11th, that's a Saturday, you can come down to Stan State and we'll be planting a bunch of them. Texts or books for further study. Ooh, I don't have it with me, but Matt Ritter has a nice new book on the California flora. It's a couple of years old now, but that's a very approachable one. You know, and then frankly, any old botany textbook is great. You know, maybe you can find one that's well out of print, or maybe at a used bookstore or something. That would contain a lot of good information for you. Figs and wasps, that's an incredible pollination story, yes. Thanks, Stephanie. All right, so California poppies are our state flower here. Come in a bunch of different flavors. Even Californica, you know, the big one, you can find individuals with different numbers of chromosomes. So there are individuals that are diploid like us, but there are also individuals that are tetraploid. That is, they have 4 copies of their chromosomes. And those are the really big ones. And in fact, I've read that some of those populations are kind of invasive, interestingly enough. One neat thing about California poppies is they're pollinated by a wide array of insects, but most of the actual color variation is in ultraviolet. So insects see into ultraviolet much better than we do. And so oftentimes in these kind of plain yellow or plain orange flowers, if you shine a black light on them or something, you'll see that there's a lot more going on. And so in this case, the stamens really light up, which are all the cluster of structures in the center. I'm being asked to pronounce this genus, and I pronounce it Escholzia. Escholzia. But you can pronounce it however you want. It's one of the benefits of using a dead language and having something named after a long dead German botanist. Question, is their size correlated to their chromosome count? My understanding is yes. I believe the really beefy ones that you see around are the tetraploids, and the smaller ones tend to be diploids. Most of them that you see are considered within Escholzia californica, but this one here on the upper right is cespitosa, which I like. I got some seeds of it, and I love the perfect square nature of its petals. Can I explain abiotic dispersal? Yeah. Thanks, Kidda. So in biology, we talk about things as being either biotic or abiotic. And so biotic simply means like living, and abiotic is non-living. So abiotic dispersal would be something like wind or water, or something, you know, where it's just dropping the seeds. Whereas biotic dispersal would be like an animal come and eating that berry and flying away and then pooping it out somewhere else. Thanks. So Escholzia, after they're pollinated, they do this incredible transformation. I'd say fire is abiotic, sure. Where the carpel, the gynecium, so the female part of the flower, it grows and extends and expands, and they can be really quite long, and they're full of seeds, and eventually they split open and the seeds are released. So because the seeds are just kind of released to fall out into the environment, we call that abiotic dispersal. One group of kind of charismatic flowering plants around here that I've studied with students at Stan State are the calico flowers. This is the genus Downingia. And Downingia are mostly endemic to California. They are vernal pool endemic plants. And so what this means is they only live in vernal pools, which are these areas all over the state and all over the world, frankly, that flood during the winter rains, and then they slowly evaporate through the springtime and into the summer. And as they evaporate, when the temperature and moisture levels are right, seeds, thousands and thousands of seeds of annual plants germinate. And they germinate and they grow and they go through their entire life cycles in a matter of weeks. So Downingias will show up with these massive explosions of purple all over vernal pools, and you just get these huge populations, all that had germinated at about the same time, and so you get to see a lot of variation in floral color and shape within a single population. And what we're really excited about with Downingia are that within a single vernal pool, you can sometimes find multiple species co-occurring. So in this picture on the lower right, you see two different species of Downingia. So the ones that are generally paler and have more widely spread lateral petals are Downingia cuspidata. Whereas the ones that tend to have more purple coloration and the much more tooth-like or pointed dorsal petals, the little ones on the top, those are Downingia bicornuta. And so here you have two different species that are going through their whole life cycle at the same time. And we wonder how they maintain that species boundary. How are they not, sharing pollen and perhaps, losing their specific identity. And so we're very interested in floral shape and pollinators. And so we've developed a system using what's called morphometrics or geometric morphometrics, where you basically use pictures always taken from the exact same vantage points. And you can plot reference points on those pictures, which allows you to mathematically characterize flower shape. And so we're studying flower shape of some of these species, and we're interested in basically the hypothesis that when they co-occur, perhaps their flower shape diverges more strongly than when they don't. And this is a hypothesis that's commonly studied in evolution, basically where, competition or some sort of process of two related groups causes them to diverge from sort of their central average or whatever. So if you want to find Downingia, you need to know where to find some vernal pools and go out there and check sometime between late March and early May. And my favorite local one around here is out at the Kesterson section of the San Luis National Wildlife Refuge.
we have a webinar coming up on vernal pools. That's the subject of one of the future webinars.
Vernal pools are you know, really just an incredible experience. I love to bring my students out there because I know that they're going to post it on Instagram. So that's what I've got. Here's a picture of a bee doing its work on a lupine. If you're looking to learn a little bit more about the botany of the plants in your garden, Calscape and Calflora are really great sites that are rooted in the science of botany and plant collection and natural history all across the state. And speaking of which, the Jepson Herbarium, which is at Berkeley, has published the entire Jepson manual, which is the standard handbook for plant taxonomy in the state. And so if you want to go take a deep dive, that's a great place to start.
You said that last question, our compound yellow flower is going to dominate the world, and so I guess that's not a real question.
Our compound yellow flower is going to dominate the world. You know, maybe. One thing that botanists say about members of the Asteraceae or the composites, they'll often just call them DYCs when they can't ID them or don't know the ID out in the field, and that stands for damn yellow composites. They're tough, but they, you know, they're all around us, and maybe they will rule the world, and probably we'd all be the better for it.
Hey, Andy, this is Cynthia. I have a basic question that goes back to the oaks. So one thing I don't understand is, why does it make evolutionary sense for the same plant to have both the male and female parts on one branch, or even on one bush or tree? Isn't the whole idea to get more diversity? So I don't understand that.
That's a great question, Cynthia. I think that probably the most common response you'll get from botanists and evolutionary biologists about that would be that by putting both of those structures together, you create a single place where you can attract a pollinator. And that's something that really sets flowering plants aside from everything else, especially the thing behind me, is that flowering plants, by making flowers, are able to attract pollinators like a bee, which can come and take their pollen and deliver it exactly to another flower of the same species. And what that means is that they have to invest so much less in producing pollen. Every year, an oak tree is producing millions and millions of pollen grains, and you know, millions and millions and millions minus a couple thousand of them probably just end up, you know, on the ground and die. So if you can put it together and make a flower and attract a pollinator, that opens up a whole new set of options. And so things like gymnosperms, like pine trees and conifers, they have male cones and female cones, and they do wind dispersal. Yeah, so it has to be related to pollination and attracting pollinators. For instance, if you had separate female and male flowers, it's a lot harder for the pollinator to know which one to go to first, and you know, stuff like that.
CC also wanted to point out that we have that field trip on February 25th, going to Knight's Ferry. There are vernal pools there that we can look at during the field trip coming up just in a couple of weeks.
Christopher noted that having the structures together doesn't necessarily negate pollination between many different individuals of the same species. The other benefit it brings is that if there aren't many other individuals around and you're not successfully pollinated, well, you could just pollinate yourself. And that's what a lot of plants do, especially a lot of, frankly, invasive plants. They don't need anyone to help them. And so just one of the many ways that plants have figured out kind of a more complex set of options.
Hi, Andy, when that happens, are those plants clones of the original plant?
So no, not while they basically are carrying, they're drawing from the pool of genetic information that the original plant had, but that pool has been kind of like remixed and delivered to them. And so while they're not going to have necessarily any new genetic variation, technically they're not genetically identical to the parent under that circumstance. Sounds like there's a cool vernal pool to check out on Wilms Road. There's mention of wet pollen. Yeah, and California poppies opening and closing. Lots of plants do that. And lots of plants also have structures that keep their pollen dry. And yeah, that's it's definitely, basically, as soon as that pollen gets wet, then it starts the process that initiates either germination or death. So they work hard to keep it dry. Ooh, is the redbud a plant or a tree? So I definitely would say it's a plant. And oftentimes people ask me if it's a shrub or a tree. And so to that end, I'd say it's hard to decide, but usually I tend to think of things with basically a single trunk as trees and things with multiple trunks as shrubs. And most of the native Western redbud that you see tend to be multi-stemmed shrubs, though I'm sure you could prune them to be much more tree-like in their form. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming.
So are there any more questions? I don't know about everyone else, but I'm kind of like sort of in intellectual shell shock. I honestly didn't know how much I didn't know. It's really crazy, but this was amazingly interesting. So we'll take I think we're almost done here, but we'll take a few more questions. Your last chance. All right. So thank you, Andy. This was absolutely fascinating. Yeah, you want to re-mention again about that Trans California Pathway March 11th event? I think quite a few people are interested in that.
Yeah, so that's an event that we do every year. It's called Science Day, and it's an event for families and anyone, frankly, from the community that's interested in learning about science. And so different student organizations, research teams, faculty, all kinds of different folks are kind of showing off what they're doing at Stan State. And so you can come and bring your family and explore, and we'll have milkweed planting on the Trans-California pathway, but we'll also, I think we're going to open up the greenhouse, and there's a pollinator garden that's kind of been recently kind of renovated by a team, and you can check that out too as well.
Is there any, where would I go to find information about that? Because I'd like to share it when I send out the next email. I'll send one out in March. And it would be nice to be able to publicize that to all our members.
Oh, here, let me see. I just need to look up the URL. So I'm going to stop my share for a second. Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
To the person that's asking about the vernal pool field trip, put in your email address and we'll send you our newsletter, which has all the details. But also, if Cece's on this call, maybe Cece, you could type in the information about that. You can go to our Facebook page to find out about it too.
That was it
I
right there?
responded. I responded in the
thank you.
chat.
All right, good deal.
That's right. We terminated the milkweed in our greenhouse. It's nice to have.
And
Well-
someone's asking what's the TNP? What is this? I think someone does not know what that is. What is it?
Oh, the Trans-California pathway. So it's the Trans-California pathway is a large garden space on the Turlock campus of Stan State. It's on the southeast corner of campus along Monte Vista Road going towards Gear. And there's a pond and a kind of an artificial stream. And it's planted with plants that represent a transect from Patterson up to Yosemite.
Oh, thank you.
Andy, that's where I first met you, actually, when you were giving a stroll down that pathway. How are things going there?
Great. We just had some, I just got facilities out there to remove some graffiti. No, I don't know. It's a complex space. You know, frankly, the Toyon are glorious right now with their big clusters of red berries. It's always full of birds, and it's a nice space. You know, if you go out into natural spaces this time of year, it's still pretty quiet, but we're about to have some real flowering activity over the next couple of months out there.
You know, you gave a tour to us. It was mainly actually to the Patterson Garden Club, and we kind of tagged along. But that was like in 2020 or 2021. It was like COVID was definitely in full swing. And I think if we tried it again now, I think we'd have a much better turnout. You know, now that we have more people that are kind of here for the California Native Plant Society, I think that it would be good to try that over again. You know?
Yeah, and you know, the Stan State campus really locked down hard during COVID, and in general, we have a fairly cautious risk team. So I've had a hard time doing public events out there, but I've been working with them to create a set of liability frameworks so that I can bring the public in a more regular and active way, like as volunteers, for instance. And so I hope to be able to be much more commonly inviting you all out there to get your hands dirty and help us out. But in the meantime, you're always welcome to stop by, and I'll certainly never turn you away. It is a public space.
I like to
Hey,
see,
Mandy, when we were there, you said something very interesting about the oak trees, about how, I mean, there's quite a few of them, and you said they were all different species or something like that.
Yeah, we probably have 8 or 10 different species of oaks out there. And among them, the best represented is the valley oak, because there's a large population of valley oaks that were all planted in 1987 by a former faculty member, and they form kind of the foundation of the pathway. And those valley oaks were planted from acorns that Wayne Pierce collected all across the distribution of Quercus lobata.
I liked Marilyn Sobel says UC Merced is having some vernal pool walks on its campus in March and April. And Cece said she was thinking about planning a vernal pool field trip to UC Merced. If we have enough interest, which I would hope we do, we have to sign waivers for the trip. So it's a bit more complicated. Jane Cohn said, any luck growing purple milkweed? Do you happen to know?
I haven't tried it. Maybe you're talking about cordifolia, the alpine one. I haven't tried it, but I'd love to.
Okay, so we are actually going to stop the recording and end, but if people want to hang out for a bit more, you can, but let's all thank Dr. Gardner for this fabulous presentation. So thank you so much.
Great.
Cynthia, you did it again. What was that? I got 127 at the top. Did you see how many people?
Wait, and Michael, hold on. I haven't stopped the recording yet. I'm trying to find the button here. Oh, here it is. Stop recording.